Welcome back to Touring the AFC South. I'm again your host, Mike Patton. You just got through listening to Dr. Aaron Wilson talk about the injuries in terms of a medical sense. But we want to talk about it from the football sense as well. And of course, who better to talk about it with than Jake Arthur, who is the senior analyst for Colts on SI. How you doing tonight, Jake?
Yeah, I'm doing good, man. Thanks for having me. It's been there's a lot to talk about with those two injuries for sure.
Definitely. I mean,
Yeah.
so how long have you been covering the Colts? If you don't mind me asking.
Um, really, ever since I started doing it for any sort of enjoyment, it's been 2013. So Andrew Luck's second off season. I've been doing it professionally, actually getting paid for it for God, probably a couple years after that. So
Awesome. So you're living the dream of a lot of people right now.
yeah, still got to work my day job though. It keeps things extra busy, but it's one of those things. This is a profession where, the grind is a thing. You kind of have to keep at it and just keep hammering away until something breaks your way where it supports you full time.
I hear you there. And actually, how did you get started? If you mind me asking that.
Yeah. So I grew up in Central Indiana, so I've always kind of had the Colts and football at the forefront. I really kind of started to become a NFL super fan when I started playing Madden when I was probably like, I don't know, like 11 or 12. I got really into football at that point, to the point where I knew way too much information not to do something with it. Like my friends were like, you gotta do something with how much you know, otherwise it's just going to waste. And so in high school, I got onto just the school newspaper and got into the sports stuff and tried to focus on the Colts there, to my editor's chagrin. But no, after that, I didn't really do much after high school with writing, and then I started a Twitter account at one point, and I saw this little Colts blog that was looking for writers back then in 2013 when I mentioned, and I just decided to kind of throw my hat in the ring. And ever since then, I've just been kind of working my way up slowly, from small time blogs to SB Nation, which is the biggest sports blog around. And then I got on with I was actually writing for the Indianapolis Colts official website. And then my latest stop is here with Sports Illustrated.
All right. Sounds like a whirlwind tour.
Yeah. Just trying to work my way up, man.
I understand. So I got to ask, how did you feel about the original trade for Carson Wentz when it happened?
Yeah, so there was they didn't have a ton of options, to be honest with you. You had Matt Stafford was available for trade, and there was a couple marquee names, but they didn't have a ton of options. My personal preference for what I thought they should have done was, maybe try to acquire some assets and trade up in the draft a little bit, maybe within the first dozen picks or so. Get someone like Justin Fields, for example. That was kind of the guy. Trey Lance and Justin Fields was who a lot of us really had circled for the Colts, but that was going to be a lot of draft capital for them to do, and they just were not going to have the ammo as a lot of the other teams to get up and be that high in the draft order. So surrendering a third round pick and a conditional second into the first round pick 2 years apart for Wentz, it's not a bad deal. I think a lot of us realistically, whether you like to make fun of how Wentz played last year or not, that's not truly Carson Wentz, and you've got to think he's going to be better in this scenario with Frank Reich, with this offensive line, with this running game, and a stable of pass catchers around him that's not spectacular, but it's solid. You've got to assume it's going to be a good move. So I got on board with it pretty quickly. Obviously, trading those picks, trading up for a quarterback in the draft wasn't going to happen after that. So yeah, you just got to do a lot of studying on Wentz, and to me, it won't make sense if he doesn't improve. So, I mean, through the first couple of days of training camp, he looked good. So,
Gotcha. Now, here we go. We got to talk about the bad part of it, which is the
Yeah.
injuries. Man, I know that had to be a downer when you heard that Carson Wentz went down with a
Yeah.
foot injury.
Yeah, it's we're kind of seasoned for quarterback injuries around here. Ones that you may not think sound too severe, but wind up being huge. Like the Andrew Luck calf ankle thing in 2019. It started out, he just wasn't participating in OTAs because he had the calf and the ankle, and then that bled into into training camp, and then he retired. So we kind of know around here that even the smallest sounding thing can be big. It just wound up being okay, here we go again type thing. Once they said they were holding him out of practice last Friday, they didn't make it sound very serious because I don't think they knew much about it yet until they did like an MRI and testing like that. So mostly we were like, maybe it is just like foot soreness and he'll be out a few days or something. But of course, it has to be something that's either going to keep him out until the start of the regular season or midway through the season. Um, the good news about if you're looking for a silver lining, they have Jacob Eason, right? They drafted him in the 4th round last year. He was really raw when they drafted him. He's one of those guys that's got lots of physical tools, but is not yet the sum of his parts. They just need to kind of rebuild him. So, they've got a lot of quarterback gurus on the staff. And last year with COVID, training camp in the offseason just didn't go how anyone wanted it to. So they didn't really get to evaluate him and kind of put him through the ringer how they would have. So he got a year mentally in the system, which was good. But the good news, I guess, is that they're kind of forced into being able to evaluate him on a pretty large stage now with the rest of the starters. So if you're looking for a silver lining, there's no Carson Wentz, but you'll probably see whether or not Jacob Eason has it or not.
And how has he performed in a practice based on reports and things like that and the things you've seen?
Yeah, I've been there for most of the practices. It's been really up and down. He's had probably 2 pretty good practices. The rest of them, his timing has been off, or his arm strength has been really scattered, which I think is weird because that's what everyone knows to be his calling card. Is he's got that really good arm talent. He'll rocket launch a short or intermediate pass like really unnecessarily, but then a deep ball will just like be a flailing duck and just hang up in the air. So that's been really inconsistent. I don't know if it's just him rushing his mechanics or what it is. But the last time we saw him, his last practice was a lot better. Let's see, today is Thursday, so it was yesterday. So no, his practice yesterday was a lot better. His deep ball looked better. He's still throwing really hard, but it was a little more controlled. So they've still got 12 more practices, and they've got the 3 preseason games, and they do expect him to play a lot in the preseason because they need to see him with the bullets flying. Because my biggest knock for him is how he handles pressure from the defense. He's got the great arm and everything, but if a defense is really pressuring him a lot, we saw it at Washington, his game just crumbles. And that is something that can really only be fixed with in-game experience from a defense that isn't yours and is allowed to hit you. So there's things to iron out. It's not time to throw in the towel on him yet. But he does need to keep stacking those good days together in order to garner some confidence.
Gotcha. Now, of course, they did sign Brett Hundley, but the big question that everyone keeps wondering is, do you see the Colts going after a guy by the name of Nick Foles?
I don't. I know from the sound of it, Nick Foles probably really wants to reunite with Frank. When I was reading between the lines during his press conference the other day, it sounded like I would really like to be back with Frank, but Carson Wentz and I have that stuff back in Philly. And I think the Colts probably feel the same way. If there wasn't the whole narrative that Carson Wentz was kind of threatened by Nick Foles' success in Philly, they may feel more on board. And to be honest with you, I think there's only if you're signing a veteran or you're bringing in a veteran quarterback to kind of help aid the season, someone who's not going to need a big, they're not going to need to learn the whole system. They can kind of hit the ground running. Nick Foles is one of the few options that makes sense, but I just don't see it happening. I just think there's probably too much history there, and they probably recognize it. It does make sense, but I just don't see it happening.
I hear you. I would wonder what dynamic would be in that locker room between him and Carson Wentz if he got there too. I was thinking that.
Imagine if Wentz is out 6-7 weeks and Nick Foles balls out. It's the whole Eagles thing all over again, because if then Wentz takes over and doesn't look good, everyone's going to be calling for Foles again, and it'll be a whole big thing, and they can just simply avoid that by not making that move.
I understand. Now, I'll say this. So I'll say the quarterback room stays the same, and Carson Wentz doesn't make it back until further on down the line, like in October. What level of confidence in this team do you have that they'll still be successful?
I think so. The first part of their schedule is rough, even with Carson Wentz. So I'd say without Carson, their best case scenario is probably to be about 500 until he would get back. Because again, the first 5 games are bad. They've got like the Rams and
they have the Seahawks too.
Rams, Seahawks, Titans, Ravens. They've got some big ones in there. So they could very well go like 1-4 or so in that first stretch. So yeah, they've got some really good pieces on that team, but I just think their schedule is so hard that it would almost be unrealistic to see them do any better than 500 while he's gone.
Gotcha. Now, what unit on the offense or defense has the most pressure on them to perform this season? Of course, now with Carson Wentz out, besides, of course, the quarterback position.
Yeah, man, I would say the offensive line, but they're pretty banged up right now too. Center Ryan Kelly has been out with an elbow injury for the past couple practices. Of course, Quentin Nelson has the Carson Wentz injury too. And then Eric Fisher is on the PUP list. The backup left tackles has not been a great situation. So it would be unfair for me to put that much pressure on them because they're so shorthanded right now. I guess I would say the running backs. Because if you've got this young quarterback and the offensive line is a little banged up, you kind of hope you can at least lean on these running backs because they have arguably the deepest group in the league. Jonathan Taylor was 3rd in the league in rushing last year. Marlon Mack ran for over 1,000 yards a year before that. And Nyheim Hines is arguably, he's like a top 3 pass catching back in the league. So you've got plenty of reinforcements at running back. If they're not successful, the offense will just be a mess.
Yeah. Let's see. I already asked you what your ideal record would be. And in your opinion, I know you're not a doctor,
Yeah.
but how long do you think Carson Wentz is out for the Colts? Just off the top of your head.
So we can really only go off what they've been saying. So Frank Reich the other day kind of gave a little rundown on both of the injuries. And he said historically, so it's this huge 5 to 12 week range, right? The reason that is because they can't really get a good evaluation until like 2 or 3 weeks post-op, and then they can get a better idea of what they're working with. So Frank Reich said that bigger guys who aren't as reliant on like their agility and speed tend to be on the shorter end of that spectrum, closer to the 5 week range. He thinks both players will probably be closer to that. If it was someone like T.Y. Hilton or like one of their speed guys, it'd probably be closer to the 12-week range because you want to get them right. It's also apparently it's a matter of there's gonna be pain regardless returning from this, but it's what is your manageable level of pain you can go through after this recovery, basically. They're hopeful that both guys are going to be back on the shorter end of that spectrum. So that's kind of what we're all hoping for. That now Quentin, I can't see Quentin missing a game. That's in his blood. So he might be back by week 1. I'm kind of looking at, maybe week 3 or 4 for Carson, just because he's a quarterback. He's got to be a little more mobile. Getting out of the pocket is part of his game. So I don't want to put the pressure on Carson to be back by week 1 because it might not be realistic. But I have a feeling Quentin might be back by week 1. If he had it his way, he definitely will be.
Well, he definitely seems like a tough guy.
Yeah,
for sure. Now, of course, we didn't talk about Quentin Nelson as much, but that's a huge loss as well. I mean, what's the chances of both of these guys, one with the left foot, one with the right foot, and the same injury? That's just that. I don't know if anybody could expect that to happen.
Yeah,
but
it's unreal. I've never heard of that injury to begin with, and then they have their best player on the whole roster, and then their starting quarterback get it within 3-4 days of each other.
Yeah, definitely. It amazed me that they both had the same injury. I had to look again to see the report. I was like, "Is this serious?" But, as far as Quentin Nelson, I mean, if he is out past week 1, you mentioned he's a tough guy. He may tough through it and come back. But, how do they cope with that? I mean, they're already missing Eric Fisher. You don't know if he's going to be there week 1. I mean, you've got Ryan Kelly dealing with an elbow injury. How do they cope with that?
Yeah, so there's obviously no replacing a guy his caliber because he's probably the best interior offensive lineman in the league, maybe the best offensive lineman in the league. They just happen to be dealing with an injury to left tackle. They don't really know when Eric Fisher is going to be back quite yet. He could start the season on the PUP list, which will put him out the first 6 weeks. So part of having a backup left tackle over there was going to be, okay, at least he's playing next to Quentin. And that can mask a lot of things, but now he might not be. Luckily, they made a very smart move and signed a guard who has played really good football before, really good starting football, in Chris Reed. He's been plugged in at the first team left guard since Quentin's been out, so they could do much worse at left guard. They have a startable player there, so that's definitely good. The expectation for Kelly is he should be back in another week or so. So he's not supposed to be out long term. So that's really good because he's one of the most critical pieces of that line as well. But man, if Quentin's out any extended period of time and Fisher starts the season on PUP, that offensive line is going to be pretty not great to start the season. But yeah, Quentin is going to be critical for helping that left tackle spot.
Gotcha. Well, had to definitely get the reports live from someone that's actually seeing the team and around the team a lot. And, definitely want to thank you for your time tonight, Jake. And, what do you want to tell everybody? Anything you're working on, how they can reach you on social media, anything like that?
Yeah, so you can see here on my tag, my little shameless plug on Facebook and Twitter. You can find me there at Jake Arthur NFL. But man, I'm just trying to stay busy as heck over here at Horseshoe Huddle. That's the official name of our site, the Sports Illustrated Colts website. We're just plugging away, trying to put out really good content. We've got a podcast as well. Josh Carney and I go on Monday evenings, the Horseshoe guys. So yeah, if you just follow along at horseshoehuddle.com or just go on to si.com and find our Colts website. We're putting out what I think is a lot of really good stuff. Josh Carney, myself, Zach Hicks, Andrew Moore. I'm really happy with the team we've got over there. So if you just follow us along, hopefully you'll like what we're putting out.
Yes, sir. Well, I thank you again for coming on. And you've been listening, everyone, to Touring the AFC South.